You know what? Despite what everyone and their mother says, I love video games and always will. Video games offer a strange sense of immersion that no form of media can or will ever be able to do. But this does not mean I'm completely biased. I mean, every game has its flaw, no matter how big or small that one flaw is. And every game has something annoying. Keep in mind, this doesn't ruin a game, I just find it annoying. But if a game will ever be perfect, we need to discuss these topics that irritate casual and hardcore gamers alike by counting down the top 10 annoying things in gaming. Now I warn you, I will be a lot more negative in this countdown, so don't take in these topics offensively, as whether you find it annoying or not, it's still in the game nonetheless. So you guys ready? Negative Shields Online. So, let's start this countdown off with one of the most irritating topics, shall we? Have you ever happened to have heard of this noise? To me, this is one of the most annoying things in gaming. I call it constant beeping. Now, annoying noises like this are usually placed in a game to tell you that you're either low on health or running out of time for a mission. It can vary, but usually it's one of those two. But the thing is, this beeping usually doesn't go away until you're back at high health or have finished the mission. And when it's constantly beeping, there are chances you're going to get irritated, especially if the context of the situation is very stressful. But it's lower on the list because it doesn't happen very often and can be easily resolved with a potion or just simply turning the TV volume down. But it's still annoying, don't get me wrong.
Hey, listen!
A lot of games have epic storyline and gameplay, which is often beautifully shown in RPGs, whether it be Fallout, World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy. But in certain RPGs, mainly MMORPGs, you're going to have a lot of fetch quests. These quests consist of simple objectives such as giving someone an item or killing enough enemies. I know it's there to teach new players the mechanics, but when you have it later in the game, it's likely to bore the player. Ever wonder why people don't play MMORPGs anymore? It's usually due to them being too damn fucking boring. I'm sorry, maybe I say this in a stupid way, but fetch quests are so damn repetitive and it annoys me. Whenever I have to perform one of these dull objectives, I usually lose complete interest in the game.
Hey, listen!
When I play a game, I like to be slowly introduced to the mechanics, which is why I favour single player campaigns. But whenever I'm introduced to a new form of multiplayer, I find myself dying a lot. Yes, part of it's due to my own skill, but there's another factor in this, and this would be fucking overpowered weapons. Whether you're new or a pro, you know about these weapons as every fucking player uses them. These can usually consist of guns that aren't nerfed quick enough, such as the BAL from Advanced Warfare or the AWP from Counter-Strike. But it's not just in shooters, a lot of the time it happens to any game with multiplayer. This can consist of the Sniper from Dota 2 or Sol from Smite. These characters or weapons are used to irritate newer players who aren't yet used to the mechanics. Sadly, I'm not a fan of online play in first-person shooters, and overpowered weapons are not helping by any fucking means.
Hey, listen!
Over the years, games have been getting a lot more advanced, as gamers these days strive for more than just shooting aliens while hiding under cover until inevitable death, despite the fact that idea will never really get out of style. But when I hear terrible voice acting in gaming, it just makes me want to go back to those days when it was a lot simpler. Terrible voice acting isn't really that rare, and that's why it irritates me. I mean, come on Final Fantasy, I know it was the first time you added voice acting in, but really? But it wasn't just back when it was first implemented. I mean, look at games like Two Worlds, and heck, even Skyrim. Those fucking kids, especially the ones in Dragon's Reach. My god, they're annoying, and they really don't need to be. Hey Bethesda, do you want some good advice? Some advice that'll really help you out? There are good voice actors out there for kids. My god, it's something you shouldn't screw up if you're a multi-million-dollar company. Heck, if Five Nights at Freddy's can do it, so can every other game company. And keep in mind that was one man. There are good voice actors out there, people.
Hey, listen!
You know what? Imagine the scene. Just imagine the scene. You're in the middle of a deep boss battle. Your party are all at low health. And the boss, it's almost dead. when out of nowhere, the boss decides to start healing itself, leaving your team having to waste more abilities and items to take it down. I know a lot of players can deal with it without a care in the world, and that's fine, but I find it absolutely irritating. And you know what, the players should have access to features the AI doesn't, and it should stay that way unless Star Trek The Next Generation happens. So until then, no more enemies that heal themselves, people.
Hey, listen!
Not everyone will know this feeling, but to me, being lost just annoys me, whether it's not knowing where you're going on a quest or just unsure where to go next. It happens a lot to me during games like GTA 5 and Skyrim. And you know what? It sometimes just makes me not want to play the game. Just because a game has got amazing reviews everywhere doesn't mean I'm going to enjoy it. I just think that any game that has decent reviews is loved everywhere. I'm sorry, but I find games like this boring. I honestly would carry on this rant, but there are a lot of players out there who enjoy these kind of games, so I'll let it slide for now.
Hey, listen!
Most games should have a sense of progression, whether it's something simple or something a little bit more complicated. Progression is what mankind strives for, which is probably why it's applied a lot in video games. Progression should start simple and move on to being a bit more challenging, but that's not always the case, and through bad game testing and plotting creates what we call difficulty spikes. Now in open world games it's not so bad, as you can always hang out in the low level areas to learn the ropes, but in linear games it's a lot tougher and a lot more annoying. And the problem with difficulty spikes is you don't know when or where they're going to happen, and they don't really stick to one genre. For example, Death Mountain from Zelda 2 and many areas in RPGs. Final Fantasy X, I'm specifically looking at you. And believe me, level grinding is not fun in certain games, which makes me despise difficulty spikes. Luckily it's not so common in newer games, and thank God for that.
Hey, listen!
You know what? I love a good RPG, but there are tropes in the genre I find very annoying, specifically random encounters. I know a lot of people will be against me on this, but I find them very irritating and extremely unnecessary, especially in newer games. Look, I understand that older games did it, but no game should really do it these days. But the problem with random encounters is there are ways to make it okay, like having certain areas for random encounters like in Pokemon, or being able to change how frequent it is like in Bravely Default. Random encounters are also annoying and just plain lazy, especially when there are ways around them. And when there's an important part in the story occurring, and random encounters are still frequently happening, I tend to get irritated. Again, I'm looking at you, Final Fantasy X.
Hey, listen!
You know what? Every game developer can try to make their experience as amazing as possible, but there's one objective they all follow. They've got to make money. And yes, I can agree to that, but because of this, it's ruining the game industry. To me, microtransactions are annoying, because not only do I not like them, but I'm a hypocrite because I've bought in-game currency such as gems from Smite. It irritates me because there's not really a way to stop it, and sadly it's starting to get in the way of developers actually trying to make good games. Once again, Final Fantasy, I'm going to have to use one of your mobile games as an example. Sadly, the amount of microtransactions are only going to be increased from here, and there's very little I can do about it. But when a company that I love for many years does it, I just die a little inside.
I suppose that is the end of Q.
Au contraire, mon capitaine! He's back!
Hey, listen!
You know what? Narrative in games has created some masterpieces, whether it be games like The Elder Scrolls or Zelda. But there's something I agree to, and that is the fact that you should never bore the player. Topics like level grinding and no fast travel are tropes that I don't like. But there's also something else I'm against, and that's not being able to skip cutscenes or tutorials. It just irritates me, especially when replaying a game. I don't want to go through all these same dialogues, cutscenes and tutorials, thank you. And the problem is, so many RPGs do it. Persona, Final Fantasy, come on, there are simple ways to make dialogue and cutscenes skippable. Look at Fire Emblem Awakening. And it's not just in RPGs, look at Animal Crossing with Mr. Rossetti. My god, he can blabber on for a while, can't he? My god, yes, I understand, save your game, but you don't need to remind me every time. This has been Xlissian, and thanks for watching.